Well, it's shocking, isn't it? Two boys, the youngest ever convicted murderers convicted of knife crime since the murder of James Bulger back in 1993.
The 12-year-olds were found guilty of murdering a man with a machete in Wolverhampton Park. In a park last year. He was actually a teen, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was 19. They stabbed Sean Sesahai in November. It was unprovoked, random, and in a text exchange, the boys said...
everyone's talking about it. Literally everyone knows.
To which the other boy replied in a voice message, "It is what it is."
And the first boy wrote back, "Everyone knows what happened. I'm scared, man." And this could be the most chilling bit. The second boy replied, "I'm not." And then he said IDRC, which is an abbreviation of I don't really care.
So should they be named? Because, of course, they are children, they're juveniles, and they've not been named. So we've got in the studio the former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire and Daily Mail columnist Sarah Vine. Let's go, Sarah Vine. Should they be named?
Well, I think the people responsible for them should be named, i.e. their parents.
The parents, yeah.
I mean, the thing is, child killers like this are not a new thing. The Jamie Bulger thing. There's, it's not a new phenomenon. But I think the time has come to say, if you've got two children this age who have clearly been exposed to the kind of influences that have led them to do something like this, we talk about the drill rap, we talk about the violent video games, we talk about all that kind of stuff. There is a parental responsibility question there. I really think there is. And the thing is, I've got teenagers. I know how difficult they can be. I know how mad they can be. But the thing is, when a child is 10 or 11, they're still children. They don't understand the consequences of their actions, really. They think everything is a game. And we all know, anyone who's been bullied at school knows how naturally cruel and aggressive children can be. It's the job of parents to sort of civilise them and to teach them not to be like that.
Yeah.
And to make sure that they have the right influences in their lives so that they don't grow up to be like that. So, of course, they are the perpetrators of the crime and they are the ones who are primarily responsible, but there's a whole hinterland there of other people whose fault this really is.
Well, and Scarlett, there's a photograph on the front of the Mail and the Sun, I think, of one of the boys posing with his machete at 1:30 in the morning, putting a photograph out. It's a 12-year-old boy doing that at 1:30 in the morning.
Yeah, I mean,
if Sarah's right, the parents should be named and shamed.
Well, no, I don't think they should be named. If the parents are named and shamed, we know the boys. I don't...
Well, everyone in the local community will know who they are anyway.
I don't... I think the parents must be going through hell. They must feel so guilty about what's happened. No, but what I think is that what we should be looking at is why it happened. And you say they shouldn't be up at 1:30 in the morning, sure. But actually, what were they doing? We know that there are zombie knives, there are machetes. That's what we need to be thinking about, is how do we get these weapons off the street, right?
I don't think it's about the knives at all. They could have done this with a kitchen knife to some extent. The thing is, one of the boys told the jurors, why did he have the machete? He said, I thought it was cool. And that's the tragedy.
Yeah, it's the culture.
The culture is so... depraved is the word I would use, actually.
But the thing is
the music.
As a parent, it's very difficult because now these children have all got mobile phones. So, until 20 or 30 years ago, you could, to an extent, protect children from these terrible influences from the adult world. So they didn't see pornography, they didn't see violent films, there's such a thing as censorship. And the reason we had that was because we understood that young children don't understand the consequences of their actions. They are children. Yeah. They're not adults, so they can't be really held responsible. But now you've got children, young, 7, 8, who are just looking at this stuff on the internet, and their brains simply aren't ready to make the judgment. They just aren't fully developed as humans to make the judgment about what's right and what's wrong. And if then you have parents who are not present or who themselves perhaps have the same sort of issues, then you've got a sort of cycle of ever-decreasing circles where children are getting more and more exposed to this kind of thing. And then you have a very vibrant street culture, rap culture, drill rap in particular, which does glorify knifing people and violence. In fact, one of the rappers that one of the boys idolised is himself
He's in
prison.
Oh, they've all been in and out of prison. I'm not exaggerating. I mean, he said one of these boys, these killers, was raised by his grandmother. He'd spent £40 on this knife, so he's obviously got access to money as well. Doing what we don't know, running for drug gangs, probably, possibly. And he'd posted a picture of himself with this knife called Prison Freestyle. And that was the name of the rapper who is currently serving prison sentence for life for stabbing a victim.
I mean, the thing is,
these are who they idolise.
Some of these rappers are making record deals in jail.
Yeah.
Particularly in America, there's a lot of them in America who are sort of richer in prison making these songs than they've ever actually been in real life. But that's quite twisted.
I mean, I still think Sarah's right about this central point. If the parents have to be. I mean, you say they must be feeling bad, but what are they feeling bad?
So, I mean, Sarah's just said that he was brought up by his grandmother, right? That actually there are serious problems. But, I mean, I think what we have to remember is this is a shocking crime, and one of the reasons it's so shocking is because it doesn't normally happen. It hasn't happened since Jamie Bulger was killed. And actually what's incredible, because there are certainly knives on the street, and there is a whole culture, is actually that we need to deal with that. But you know, Britain is not going to the dogs because of this, right? This is a terrible, terrible one-off.
But knife crime is... The figures for knife crime are up and down the country, the length and breadth, it's up dramatically. It is cool for kids to have a blade.
So therefore...
And how do we change that?
Therefore, I remember years ago talking to the East London police who actually... Every time they caught a boy with a knife, they would go to his parents and they would talk through actually how that if you've got a knife, you're more likely to be stabbed. I mean, actually, we've got to do something instead of sort of saying, you know, this is terrible. We've actually got to do something about it.
But you say that. But the thing is my son was robbed at knife point 2 years ago in our street in Chiswick, Leafy Chiswick, by two young men, probably about the same age as him, maybe slightly younger than him, I'd say, probably 16 or 17, with zombie knives. Now, you know, that is actually not that unusual in the experience of him and his friends.
And they're not.
Another one of his friends who was at Notting Hill Carnival 2 years ago was chased by a group of 4 or 5 of them with zombie knives. And he's a local boy. You know, it's not like he was sort of some sort of naive kind of. So it is. It's a culture. Yes, the knives are sort of. They're the instrument, but, you know, it could be anything, to be perfectly honest, because the culture is of aggressive gang behaviour.
And why is prison not a deterrent? I remember hearing an interview with somebody who'd been in prison exactly fitting this profile, and he said, my life outside was dangerous and scary. I had nothing to live for. I wanted to be in prison. Yeah. I would have felt safer. He's like, I felt safer going to prison.
Might even learn something.
But going back to the parents...
Well, if we had decent prisons. I mean, frankly, awful. You know, when your ex-husband was in charge of prisons, he really tried to do something.
Yes, absolutely.
So that they came out not reoffending and there was education.
He understood. The second he went round all the prisons after he got the job, I remember him coming home absolutely ashen-faced and saying, gosh, because he understood that prisons are essentially full of people who have been failed by the education system. Yeah. And so you have another opportunity when they are in prison to try and help them be something other than what they've ended up being. And that, you know, but that's the Conservatives, you know, the Tories get very upset about that sort of thing because they think it should be punishment. But going back to the parent thing, I do think that if parents thought that they might in some way be held responsible for their children's behaviour, for underage children's behaviour, I think that would be a contributing factor.
They might be more proactive.
Thing improving.
They might be more proactive.
Exactly, they might be more proactive. There was a case recently in America where 2 parents were convicted because they had allowed their child to get hold of the gun, and then the kid had gone and shot. I think it was a school shooter. I can't really remember the details, but I know that was it. And they were convicted because the jury said you allowed your child underage to have access to this gun, for which, you know, and so therefore you are responsible. And I think there is a moment where, as parents, you have to say, I can't just blame the lack of youth clubs or the drill rap or the knife or the this or that. I have to accept that I have not done a good job with my child.
But I think, Sarah, that in that case, actually, the gun was in the house, right? And quite rightly that the parents didn't stop the son from taking it. But and there was a whole gun culture in the house. But I mean, for all we know, I mean, as you say, a grandmother brought this child up. I mean, and maybe she didn't pay enough attention. But to say it's her fault, I think is really, really difficult.
She's not some 89-year-old granny here we're not thinking about. She was a grandmother, I think, who was probably in her 50s.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's her fault. I'm just saying she should bear some responsibility for it.
They were known to the police, these
They
two
were.
villains, already.
Yeah.
And they were at school together. The teachers will have known who they were.
Yeah.
I can't help but thinking it wouldn't have even come as much of a shock when they eventually killed somebody.